guys. Can everyone just like show a reaction or put it in the comments section if you guys can hear me right now, just so we can test. Awesome. So hi everyone. My name is Natalie Yang, and welcome to our third set of the 2021 Youth Environmental Summit section. This workshop is called Urban Gardening: Making a Change in Your Own Community. So there's a lot of really cool information and what I consider a youth expert in this area. But before we get started, I'd like to remind some of our attendees that everyone is muted with your video off. So please utilize the comment feature to the right of the screen throughout the session to share your questions or comments with our presenter. We'll be monitoring this throughout the session, and we'll also have a facilitated Q&A at the end where you can grab the mic, and this will also be during the presentation as well by clicking the icon in the bottom corner, and we'll bring you up to the screen to ask your question. Please also feel free to use the reaction features, as many of you did already. If you hear a new idea, want to share applause, or just celebrate in general, it's great to have the interaction. Additionally, I want to share our etiquette guidelines in advance. The first thing, you should access the grab the mic feature unless our speaker states so. And while speaking, please use appropriate language in a clear voice. Please also be mindful of your background while you're on stage. When you're ending your conversation on stage, respectfully leave by closing both your camera and mic feature, and respect the speaker by listening attentively. Also, listen and be considerate of others. Please don't comment any impolite statements to those speaking, and if you have questions, utilize the comment box for the moderator to note. Don't ask or post anything that's irrelevant to the topic being discussed. So the YES team would also like to thank our sponsors for their generous support of the conference. So please make sure to check out their booths in between the sessions, as many of those are environmentally geared and want to help our cause as well. So finally, I'm really happy to introduce Megan Chen to our YES Environmental Summit. Megan is currently a rising freshman attending Stanford University, where she'll be majoring in urban studies and public policy. She's passionate about environmental justice, racial equality, and women's rights. She's also the founder and executive director at the Urban Garden Initiative, a 501 nonprofit organization that focuses on environmental sustainability and gardening education. She's also the author of the children's book Finding Tiger, that addresses the issue of implicit bias and stereotyping. So you guys should definitely check out both her organization and her book. So Megan hopes to pursue a field in social entrepreneurship and public policy to continue to help serve her community every day. So I'm going to let Megan take the stage.
Thank you, Natalie. Hopefully you guys, can you guys let me know again if you can hear me as well? Hopefully. Okay, looks like you guys can. Yeah, well, I'm super excited to meet all of you guys. I know I can't see your faces, but there's definitely a lot of interaction in the workshop that I'm going to be hosting. So please use the comment feature. There'll probably be times where I'm going to ask for you guys share the mic as well. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen. Alrighty. Can you guys see my screen? Yes? You can? Okay, cool. Great. So I would say that like kind of mentioned before, it is going to be casual. There's going to be a lot of conversation. If you want to jump in here or there, please just stop me. But the main topic that we're going to be talking about today is climate change and food sustainability, how they're related, how you guys can make an impact about both of these issues, stuff like that. So let's jump in. So Natalie gave an amazing kind of overview of what Tougie does, but just to tell you guys a little bit more about Tougie first before we jump into the actual topic. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization that is for youth and by youth. So it's really important for us to get youth voices in every single stage of the organization. And we aim to inspire and empower youth to achieve urban sustainability through a gardening-based program. We got started here within Wilmington, Delaware, which I know is where many of you guys are, really working on tackling the major food desert issue within the city. And from that point onwards, we are now a global organization. I want to say we are in over 15 different countries, 30 different states, in the form of different chapters that are located at a lot of high schools and colleges. And a lot of the things that we focus on are just environmental programming and workshops, global environmental initiatives, and gardening, of course. So at the end of the workshop, I will touch on some little things that you guys can do if you want to get involved with Tugi in any capacity. And if you have any questions, of course, feel free to reach out to me. And again, this is just touching on some of the things that we've been able to accomplish through Tugi. So as mentioned, over 60 chapters. We've at this point been able to work with over 10,000 students, especially a lot of our chapters work with incredible schools in their communities as well. And then we've been able to engage over 400 volunteers in both virtual and in-person settings. So now, okay, this video is a minute. It's a little embarrassing because I have to watch myself, but I will show you guys just to get a little bit more of a feel of like what Tugi is and what we do.
Hi, my name is Megan. I'm the founder of the Urban Garden Initiative. The Urban Garden Initiative is a youth-based initiative teaching underserved communities how to properly urban garden and thrive within their communities.
One of the greatest things about community garden and school gardens and what it teaches students is that it's a practical application of what you learn in the classroom. By getting out into the garden, you actually get to see some of those, principles that you're talking about and see how they actually might apply into the real world. And so that really changes the way that you think about learning.
The most rewarding process of this whole thing is definitely just to connect with all these like-minded individuals on a global sense and just, on a community level that are all passionate about the same exact environmental issues that we are, and really creating these programs that youth have become so engaged in, learning so much from, and just seeing their faces light up when we're actually growing food and they can actually eat it.
Cool. I know that was very laggy, sorry about that, but hopefully you guys got a little glimpse of more so what Tugi does. Let me exit the video now, if I can do that. Escape. Okay, there we go. Cool. So now we will jump into the actual topic of the day. I have back-to-back videos, but I really love this one from Bach, so we will watch it. It's just a couple minutes.
One of the mistakes people make about climate change is saying that the planet is at stake.
Is it the last chance to save the planet from climate change?
Tens of thousands of activists warning climate change is destroying the Earth. Biggest cause in Hollywood is saving the Earth. Climate change and all that.
That's not really the right way to think about it. Earth has gone through immense climate changes many, many times before, in some cases leading to mass extinctions. But life persisted. Mammals evolved from reptiles and primates from mammals. They stood up and walked out of Africa, eventually reaching the corners of every continent. But only after well over 100,000 years of wandering did the real human innovation happen, when 12,000 years ago we stopped foraging and started farming. Agriculture meant villages, cities, society, government, the birth of civilization. But why did it take so long for humans to take control of their food? Well, if you look at this chart of global temperature change going back 100,000 years, you might notice something special about the last 10,000 years. That's when the climate settled into a period of unusual stability. It was on this ledge that human society developed, where reliable seasons fed more and more people, where knowledge accumulated and science began. Until eventually, inventors created machines that could unleash unimaginable growth and mobility. All they needed was fuel to burn, and they found it in the form of ancient forests, buried under dirt and compacted over 300 million years. With these coal deposits, humans unearthed tons and tons of carbon that had been locked away long before our species appeared. And that's how we began to disrupt the climate that birthed us, the climate that our food systems and infrastructure are built upon. After 10,000 years of temperatures that varied only within about 1 degree Celsius, scientists now say we're on track for 3 degrees of warming by the end of the century if we don't change course. Humans have been around for 0.004% of Earth's history. And of all of human history, the 200,000 years since our species began, we've had agriculture for just 5% of that time. We've had electricity for 0.07% of that time. The simple truth about climate change is that it isn't new to the planet, but civilization is. And here's what's even newer. In the past 100 years, the number of people alive has quadrupled, and thus so has the capacity for suffering. So slowing down climate change isn't about saving the planet. It's about us, about our vulnerability to a level of climate disruption that human civilization has simply never seen before.
I always love that video. And I'd love to hear some of your thoughts about kind of what they discussed in that video as well. Let me go to the comment section. But yeah, I think in addition to, you know, what they say about climate change, something that's just really amazing that they touch on during it is like the importance that it's not simply just environment, it's kind of like its impact on us, and climate change in and of itself is not something that's new. I feel like a lot of times nowadays we associate, you know, climate change with bad, but as mentioned, climate change is something that's been going on for thousands and thousands of years, and it's more so today's human impact that's really affecting it and making it this kind of negative thing that we're hearing about all the time. So let's go to
one of the mistakes people make.
Let's see if I can go to the next thing. Okay. So I'm sure all of you guys know what climate change is. Of course, you guys are all attending the summit, so it's all familiar. But just quickly going over this, ice ages are a prominent example of in the past how climate change also has affected our Earth. Obviously, that wasn't great as well, but they're really just these like abnormations within what's going on with the Earth and long-term change and kind of the expected weather. Of course, like right now, I would say, especially with what just happened in Texas and what's going on, even here with the consistent snow that we're having in Delaware and this really on and off kind of weather, we are really experiencing firsthand what some of the effects of climate change are, and we're only going to see things kind of get worse and worse. So 3 main reasons for why climate change is caused. It really breaks down to burning fossil fuels, deforestation, and of course, on top of it all, human activity. All 3 of these things are kind of underneath the category of human activity, of course, but these are just 3 of the kind of leading contributors. So fossil fuels, oil, and gases rising up in our atmosphere, creating something which many of you guys know is the greenhouse effect, which again, I think the thing that's kind of cool about environmental science is everything is so relative. The greenhouse effect in and of itself is something that is absolutely needed to make Earth kind of as we know it. We do need some warming. But today, because of just the sheer number of fossil fuels that are entering our atmosphere, it has become something that's a lot worse. Deforestation, trees taking in a lot of carbon dioxide. Of course, we are now getting to a point where we're chopping down more trees and we're kind of planting them. And then all of our human activity. I think the most surprising thing for me is just how much some of our actions really contribute to the Earth. And the other day, I was actually, funny enough, I was doing one of the, if you guys have done it before as well, like the ecological footprint calculators, as well as like a water footprint calculator, and just realizing that so many of little actions that you guys are doing, like even shopping online, buying something on Amazon, getting your food at the grocery store, like all of those things create some type of carbon footprint. They use some amount of water to create, and all the things that we're doing collectively now, like 7+ billion of us, are just, you know, really damaging our Earth as we know it. So again, results of climate change, it boils down to 4 different things. I won't jump too into detail into most of them, because today we really are going to be focusing on food, something that I think a lot of people forget when we talk about climate change and kind of its effects on what is going on our planet. But some of the other ones, of course, oceans rising, I think we hear about that all the time. Weather, we touched on that a little bit. If you guys have other like weather things that have been going on that you want to mention, maybe especially in other parts of Delaware as well, feel free to put that in the chat. Health, a lot of, especially in cities, a lot of pollution, all of that kind of stuff. But most importantly, or most important today, food, and how climate change is not only affecting where and how we can grow food, but how your kind of food footprint, as I like to call it, is affecting this global issue. Food sustainability. So now we're going to enter a little activity, and if we are in person, this will be a little bit easier, but we're going to try to make this work via this platform. So pretty much what's going to happen, if you guys like watched Jubilee videos before, you know, like Spectrum, which is I will have a word phrase kind of displayed on the screen and just want to hear if you guys agree, disagree, maybe you're somewhere in the middle, and just put your ideas in the comments, and then we are going to ask a couple of you guys to share the mic and kind of explain your thought process. It's going to start off pretty easy. Some of these I feel like we're going to have a consensus on if it is yes or no, but we're still going to do them anyway. So if you guys can see the first phrase on my screen, also put any questions in the chat as well, but it's easy to eat healthy foods. So if you guys agree with that, say yes. Don't agree with that, no. Maybe you're somewhere in the middle. And if you feel comfortable, we're going to ask you to share the mic.
Megan, can you see the comment section?
Yeah. I'm thinking we should have a couple. Krista, I love to hear your point of view. And then Jane, you said like absolutely yes. So I'd love to hear from both of you guys why you believe that. Is there any way I can get them to share the mic, or how does that work?
Yeah, so Krista just shared the mic.
Okay.
Hello.
Hi. Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, you can hear me? Okay. I said for the most part because I, for one hand, love eating McDonald's and a bunch of like not healthy foods, but I do also like eating healthy foods like salads and tomatoes and like what are they called? Potatoes. I said for the most part because sometimes it can get hard to continue eating healthy for a continuous amount of time when sometimes you just crave a burger or a soda. But it's very easy to eat healthy. I just think sometimes you just crave a certain type of food.
Yeah, for sure. No, that definitely makes sense. And then let's hear from Jane as well. Jane, you said absolutely yes.
Because healthy food, you can make it in a way that it's quite like foods that you may be craving, and they can be delicious just like any other unhealthy food. So from that sense, yeah, eating healthy food is really easy. And Amalia in the comments, she just said something, and I hadn't thought about the cost aspect as much, so I can see what she's saying.
Yeah, for sure. And Amalia, you actually touched on the point that I was just about to touch on, I think, kind of the main topic about how food is relating to a lot of like social justice issues that we are talking about today. And it's not really something that people maybe automatically associate, like food and social justice, but a lot of what Jane and as well as Krista just shared, of course, it's all your personal experience. And what we're going to be talking about today is something called a food desert, and kind of this idea that for people that live in food desert communities, it's extremely difficult to access healthy food for a variety of different reasons. It won't spoil too much. We'll have a discussion when we get to that, but it definitely does have to do really largely with the amount of income and also kind of what is around you. Like maybe you do have income, but there's no places that you can access healthy food. Okay, the next statement that we're going to do is organic foods are better than conventional foods. So if you guys can do the same thing that you just did, drop your ideas in the chat. Yeah, Kamani, if do you want the mic? And I'd love to hear why you say it depends. How do I do that? Let's see.
I can be in charge of just bringing them up.
Am I here?
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay. I was thinking, because it really depends. Some things are marketed as organic, and I feel like people use that as like a way to get away with things, because you see a lot of like prepackaged snacks or like diet foods and things like that marketed as like organic. When it's like everything else, like you look at the saturated fat content and everything like that, it's through the roof, and that's like the one thing people focus on. But when it comes to things like fruit and vegetables, I think it makes sense to have organic foods. So, yeah.
Cool. Yes, really nice viewpoint. And I got some other comments in the chat, all really good. It's all like a spectrum. Again, I won't, because, we don't have like a ton of time today. Oh, if I can take back the mic. Okay, cool. Since we don't have like a ton of time today, I won't dive into this video, although I really like this video as well. But something that I think people don't necessarily even realize, even when it comes to organic food, is how organic might be better for us, but organic doesn't always necessarily mean it's better for the environment. Oftentimes, because you're using a lack of pesticides and other kind of artificial things that you might be using to grow conventional food, as you describe it, you have to use a lot more land and therefore a lot more water and a lot more resources to be growing organic food versus conventional. There's also a lot of foods, and I think Kimani touched on this point, that not every food, they kind of market it as organic, but do you really get like the benefits of organic? Like, for example, banana. You're not eating the peel, which is where they would kind of be putting the fertilizer on anyway. There's not really a point of getting organic. And then there's this whole argument, especially when you kind of work with or reach like lower income communities, how organic food is not even accessible altogether. So that is also a really kind of large area of debate, and loved hearing your guys' perspectives.
Use that.
We will do a couple more statements. I think we have like 2 more. So people shop at farmers markets frequently, and I would love for you guys to share more so like in your community. And I know we're all kind of like in Delaware, so it's a pretty small perspective, but at least in your kind of local community, if you're able to shop at farmers markets frequently. Can some people add into the chat? Pretty much the main question is if or do you shop at farmers markets frequently? Yeah, definitely. I love your point, Kamani. Yeah, if we can hear some other perspectives. Amalia. Yes, definitely. This one I won't do share the mic, just because I think a lot of your responses, it all like makes sense. But yeah, farmers markets, I think definitely within Delaware, depending on kind of where you're at, is definitely a rarity. And a lot of what went into like me wanting to create the Urban Garden Initiative is, I want to say almost for 6 months, maybe more than 6 months, I worked at an urban garden right within Wilmington, and kind of relating to that, I was able to work at this farmer's market where we would bring like garden produce that we were kind of growing to that farmer's market every single week, and realized that especially within Wilmington, that is such a rarity, and all the people who came to the farmer's market absolutely loved it, but it really just did not exist a lot of the time. So that was kind of like eye-opening. I personally live in Newark. I live really near New York Natural Foods, and some of you guys also live near me. I know every summer they do a farmer's market, but farmers markets are definitely a great way to support kind of your local farmers, your local growers, but prices, kind of accessibility, all of that's really a huge issue. And I think this is our last one. Yeah. So right before we go into food desert, this one I'm really curious to hear what you guys think. Is every city a food desert? And Esther, I know you've been like chatting, but I'd love for you to come and kind of grab the mic and share.
Hello.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. When I learned about food deserts, it was normally in impoverished communities, and like what I learned it as was that food deserts are basically like having a lack of healthy foods. So like in my community, I don't believe it's a food desert, but yeah.
Yeah, great point. I will address a couple of things that you said in a second. I'm curious to hear. Let's do one more person. Marilyn, if you want to grab the mic. Oh, don't have a Mac mic. It's all good. Okay, let's do one more person. Let's do Adiba.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay. When I think of food deserts, I think of places where more like poverty and people don't have access to food. I think there's a lot of areas where people have high income and have a lot of access to food. So, yeah.
Yeah. Cool. So super similar points, I want to say, to Esther, which is really great. So yeah, let's have a conversation now about kind of like what food deserts are, where they exist. Maya, I love that you brought up that food deserts can also occur in rural places. So there's definitely association, I will start off by saying, definitely between kind of like lower income communities and food deserts. But I think when we think of like food deserts, either a lot of times when I was first at least hearing about it, I have this idea, it's like, oh, they have, this complete lack of food. But you go into a place like Wilmington, which I'm sure many of us have gone into, and you wouldn't even necessarily associate it with being a food desert. You're like, oh, there's restaurants, oh, there's like McDonald's, stuff like that. So that's definitely kind of one aspect of what a food desert can be, especially in super populated places. Because of a lack of kind of like healthy food grocery stores, there might be an influx of McDonald's and fast food places and all of those. But there's also, in a lot of these locations, there are little grocery stores, which maybe they're like a convenience store. Maybe it's, I think in New York, like bodegas, stuff like that, where there are healthy fruits and vegetables, but those are astronomically priced so much higher than just like going to McDonald's and getting a Big Mac. So when your priority that week it's like just getting food and not necessarily, what is going to feed my body the best and like which thing has more vitamins, the choice is between the two. It's like not really difficult to kind of go for the slightly cheaper option. So as you guys can see, a couple of these statistics here that I think are kind of interesting, and I'm going to touch on Maya's point that not every city is a food desert. There's also a lot of rural communities where I was like talking to a friend in California, and even like I feel like California, you associate it a lot with like farming, gardening, and all of that. But some people there live like 30 miles away, especially if they're in more of like a rural community from kind of the local grocery store, like 15, 20 miles, 30 miles. And it's pretty far every week. You can't go there on a daily basis. So I think for cities, I want to say, this might actually be on the next slide, maybe not, but I want to say that the statistic is that for rural communities, it's like around 15 miles. If there's no radius of like a grocery store, then that's considered a food desert. And then for urban communities especially, it's around 2 miles, because a lot of people in urban communities, they don't have a car. Public transportation might be difficult, especially nowadays. So the distance is a lot shorter, even if there is the local restaurant, maybe here or there. There's not nearly the number of grocery stores needed for the population of that area. Like I just said, the public transportation area is like a pretty big thing, especially as of recent. And especially in cities, this is a whole other issue, but just public transportation in general and making sure that it's reaching all parts of the community is really important. And then suburban and rural areas, public transportation might not exist altogether. So if you don't have a car, you can't really carpool with someone. There's actually no way for you to go to a grocery store that's like 25 miles away from your house. I think increasingly because of climate change and kind of what we're talking about earlier, all these things all kind of come together and culminate to a really important issue, which is that climate change is affecting where and how we can grow. And as climate change continues to like flood different areas, and maybe there's extreme like heat storm, and so completely like dries out certain areas, now certain places are not able to grow. And it's oftentimes these like food deserts and these communities that are really suffering the most versus like our grocery stores, because already they start off with a pretty limited amount of healthy food, and then when they're not able to receive even some of the other food because of growing patterns and how distribution and all of that works, it's becoming even more limited. And it's a really huge issue that I think a lot of us really need to care about. There's a lot more food deserts than we really realize across America even, and I think that's also something that's really surprising. We talk all about like global poverty in a lot of other countries, but or kind of not global poverty, but food poverty and hunger and stuff like that in other parts of the world, but not really even across America. But it's definitely a really big issue across a lot of communities. And so I think, let's see, are there any questions on this list I would like to ask? Some of these are really self-explanatory, so I don't really want to ask you guys those. Let's see. How many food options? I feel like we've touched on a lot of these. Yeah, there's not really any questions unless you guys have like any comments you want to make also about, food deserts that really weren't being addressed, kind of what was just discussed. But I feel like we almost like ran through all these questions, which is really nice. And so now kind of looking at it locally, since all of us are in Delaware, and I would say kind of in our local area, Wilmington, Delaware would be kind of considered the largest food deserts. So 71% of supermarkets are located in the greater Wilmington area suburbs, where only 29% are located in the populous parts of Wilmington within the city. So pretty self-explanatory that, it's kind of in the inner city that we have more lower income minority communities that are, again, being unjustly kind of addressing or being part, like right in the middle of these issues, while you're kind of in the greater Wilmington area in the suburbs and you do have access to a lot of that food. So that kind of ties into that social justice piece that we were talking about earlier, and how a lot of these issues are not mutually exclusive at all, and they're all interconnected in some way. And in urban centers, mainly a lot of times it's corner stores. I think a lot of people think, it's just because there's no grocery stores there is no healthy food. There are healthy food places, but a lot of those places have their bananas and apples and veggies priced a lot higher than, their chips and soft drinks and all of that. So one question I do want to propose, and again, I'd love for someone to share the mic and answer this, is how or why, and there's no one, perfect solution or one answer to this, which is why I want to ask you guys, but how or why do you think Wilmington became a food desert, and what are some ways, just throw out some ideas, what are some ways you guys feel like we can tackle this issue? So feel free to answer both parts of that question, maybe just one part if you're not sure about another, but I am really curious to hear your thoughts on this. Okay, just to repeat the question again, and maybe some of you guys are typing, which is all good, but main question is how or why do you guys feel like Wilmington maybe became a food desert? Like I said, again, there's really like no one solution or one kind of answer to that question. And then just out of curiosity, and maybe if you guys are really interested in kind of food justice, what are some ways you guys feel like we can tackle it? Yes, Nathan, I definitely agree. Nathan, do you want to grab the mic and kind of briefly share? Nathan, I don't think I can hear you. I don't know for everyone else. No, I can't hear you. Oh, looks like no one can hear you. I'm so sorry. I really want you to share, but I love your viewpoints in the chat. If you figure out your mic, let me know. In the meantime, does someone else want to briefly share and grab the mic on this? It is a hard question. I agree. Okay, I'm just going to start discussing some of the things that kind of lead to it and some of the solutions that are currently being implemented in the city. And if you guys are brainstorming, maybe researching in the meantime, feel free to kind of answer this. But I think in terms of what I personally believe and kind of have learned through Wilmington, I think it really is a kind of a compilation of a lot of different things that are kind of leading to it. So the fact that it is a city, so you really can't grow anything. And I want to say until kind of almost the past 10 years, there really is not a lot of green space innovation, not a lot of kind of urban gardens within the city. I just know in the past couple of years as well, I've been working with some of the various urban gardens within Wilmington, and a lot of them are extremely new or being built right now. Even the ones that are being built, they're kind of being underutilized, and community members maybe don't even know that it's kind of existing in those areas. I think it's also kind of due to lack of environmental education, and lack of kind of education about some of these different issues. It's also kind of just due to the history of Wilmington, and again touching on some of the social justice issues on how it kind of Wilmington became what it is today, and how that has made it kind of become a food desert. And just touching on something before we get into the gardening component of, so Maya, you touched on it perfectly. Exactly. That is definitely a reason for it. And then kind of just quickly touching on some really cool things that I think recently in Wilmington, especially if you guys are in the area, want to check out, is kind of the increase of hydroponic farming, which I think is really amazing. It's kind of the future of growing in cities. If you guys don't really know what hydroponic farms are, it's growing entirely indoors all year round. You can almost grow anything you want within it, and it's just due to special lights and fertilizer, and really allows a lot of urban spaces with pretty much no green space, what many times you call brownfields. If you guys have or maybe haven't heard of brownfields, especially for previously industrial cities, and places where the soil is really not, you're not able to really use it at all for gardening. This is a really great way to kind of work around that. And then in addition is kind of the new, recently I think they just added 2 of these into Wilmington, which is community fridges. So they are pretty much just free fridges stocked entirely with a lot of really healthy food and veggies, and anyone from the community who really needs it can just go there, grab it. It's free to use for everyone. I think the first 2 community fridges were just installed in Wilmington, which is really exciting. And then I saw Miss Tracy saying, if Amalia or Marilyn, I know, Marilyn, you said your mic doesn't work, so Amalia, if you want the mic and briefly touch on hydroponic gardens, feel free.
Hello, I'm in Miss Tracy's club at Odyssey Charter School, Girls Grow Greens, and we do a lot of hydroponic gardening in there. A meeting is tomorrow. We grow lots of greens, and we've learned a lot. I've learned a lot about how it works, and the machinery and the maintenance that goes behind this, and how we can use hydroponic gardening to help our community.
I love that. Yay. And then Marilyn said as well, yes, that is really cool that you guys are doing hydroponic farming and kind of gardening. Definitely I've been kind of delving into that realm. I recently just got myself a personal hydroponic garden that I'm starting, so I'm very excited for that. Okay, so before we kind of move into Q&A, I realize we don't have a ton of time. Time always passes by way too fast. We're going to touch on something that 2E does a lot, and I think is something, again, that maybe some of you guys have started in your homes, but would love to see this become more of a widespread thing, which is container gardening. So it's honestly one of, I would say, the easiest, cheapest ways to be growing in really small spaces. And the reason why many times for kind of especially Toogi's work, wait, Miss Tracy, that was literally Let Us Grow reached out to Toogi as well. And that's who we're partnering with. And we're working with them to install a couple hydroponic gardens. So that's so super cool. I will answer some of the other questions in a quick second in the Q&A, just because I do want to do this little demo right here. But container gardening, especially while we bring it to a lot of the schools that we work with in Wilmington or, across the country or the world, is because if you don't really have a lot of green spaces in a certain area, you can bring this indoors, you can grow. You don't really need large plots of like green, nice land to be growing on, and you can still grow a lot of the same veggies that you would grow in other spaces. It's just a really, honestly, easy way to get started. So I will touch on some of these like rapid fire things, and as you guys have more questions about gardening, I'm happy to answer during Q&A. But it's all about really choosing the right pot. Depending on what you're growing, it needs different amount of space, and I think especially for a lot of like beginner gardeners, that's something that we often mess up on. You don't really realize how much space a certain plant needs, how this like tiny little seed when you first start grows into this huge plant. So really making sure that you give it the ample amount of space, that there is holes at the bottom, of the pot that you're using as well, that there's drainage and the plant can actually thrive, all of that kind of thing. And also kind of touching on soil quality as well. This really depends again on like where you're growing, what you're growing, all of that, but different nutrients that are really key within soil, making sure that you're fertilizing your soil if you're just using not super like high quality soil or like soil just for vegetables. Putting in kind of the right fertilizers is really important. All of the basic supplies, which I think most of us honestly have all these things at home. What I always love to talk to different people about is that you don't need to go out and buy the best container or like buy all these supplies. For like pots, you can literally just recycle a pot that you've used. Even like something like a yogurt container, you can put a hole at the bottom and you can grow some really simple plants like lettuce that doesn't need a ton of room in it. And you can use a lot of, just like pots and different containers you have at home. Seeds you can actually reuse from some of the veggies that you eat. You can just like save the seeds, dry them out, use them, all of that kind of thing. And a couple final little tips. So especially now that we're in winter, I would say this is kind of more so relevant when you are talking more like fall to winter kind of transition, but the frost state, also like winter to spring, just making sure it's not too cold for your plants and you're not like freezing them off. Overwatering versus underwatering, pruning your dead leaves. And as always, even for people that know a ton about gardening, like Google is the best resource if you're growing, especially like a special type of plant, making sure that you are giving it the right nutrients when it needs it. That was super fast. And so if you guys do have questions about gardening and things like that in Q&A, I'm really happy to like jump a lot deeper into various gardening tips and tricks. But we won't actually be growing these things. These are like a couple plants while we're on it, though, that I would kind of suggest if you are interested in getting started with something kind of fast and kind of easy. Usually we grow these at Toogi, like the fall, like early fall kind of stage. And they take a couple weeks and you get kind of at least some result and you kind of see the plant that you're growing. Lettuce, radishes, peas, all really fast, all really delicious, and fun things to grow on your own. So we're going to skip these slides, and we're going to do a little demo. And then I think after the demo, I will go into some volunteer opportunities, and then we'll do a little Q&A. So let me see if, I don't quite know. Here, let me stop sharing my screen for a second so you can actually just see me. This is super easy and a very quick demo. I only wanted to show you guys this because I feel like we all have some of these materials at home. But pretty much what I have right here, I was going to do a little like soil demo, but I realized that, you guys all know how to take a pot, put soil in it, put your seeds in it. This is just a little thing that's also really easy, but maybe you didn't know as much so. Is just taking, honestly, some glass container. I think both of these ones that I have right here are from like some used candle. I just like, this one I haven't even taken off like the stickers from. They don't really have holes because what we're going to be growing is just green onion, and I didn't even cut this one. So green onion is like honestly the easiest plant to start off with. There's almost no way that you can pretty much like kill green onion. Once you're done using kind of this like green part that you would normally use for cooking, this little like stem bit at the end that you can see that you can see with like some tiny roots of like the green onion. That's like the part that you're normally just going to throw in the trash, and you just leave around like let's say an inch, 2 inches of it. After you use all the remaining parts, you would just take one of these containers. I'll save you from like the whole process, but just like pour your water into it, maybe like a couple inches high, stick your green onion into it. And then honestly, even within a week, you will already start to see some of the roots grow into your container. If the water is getting kind of gross, change out the water. If you really want to like kind of reuse your green onion again and again and again, you can do the same process. You can take your green onion, sorry, my voice, but you can take your green onion and you can put it into soil as well and kind of grow it outdoors. You can grow in a little pot in your kitchen. It is super cool. And like, you know, my mom was like recently doing it over the summer, and I always like joke that we have almost like a little green onion farm growing outside, because we just have so many green onions growing, and it's a great way to like reduce food waste as well. So just want to share that little bit with you guys. Just think about how you can like reuse some of the veggie scraps that you guys have, because oftentimes, especially for veggies and kind of biodegradable materials, you can always think of some way other than just throwing it in the trash and do something else with it. Okay, so before we go into Q&A, I do want to save like 10 minutes for that. I will just really quickly touch on, if you've been listening to all of this, you're like, yeah, I'm really passionate about food justice and environmental justice and climate change education and all of that. And you're like, I want to get involved in Tugi somehow, so here's a couple ways that you can get involved. I think Natalie already linked the website to Tugi in the chat, so definitely check that out. But I would divide getting involved into like 3 main categories at Tugi. So on the largest kind of like global scale, there's always remote positions, which I know for many of you guys, since we are still in a pandemic, it's really important. So this is a lot of like the social media skills and the blog writing and curriculum development and grant writing and all of that kind of stuff. There's a really simple volunteer application on Tugi's website that you can totally get involved in. Should take you like 5 minutes to fill out, and someone on our community service team will reach back out to you and kind of get you involved in into any of those various positions that we have. We're super passionate about what we have for what's going on at Tugi. You can consider starting a Tugi chapter at your school. So a Tugi chapter does a lot of these different things that, you know, we were discussing just now, but in their local school. So they are teaching their fellow students, they're working with their local community centers and schools and providing workshop and education and starting gardens and doing all of that. And we have chapter cycles that kind of open up throughout the year. So if you are interested right now, I think it's temporarily closed, but you can personally reach out and just let me know. And I'll definitely be sure to send you the information when it opens back up again. Oh, that was actually the last thing. And then the middle thing is getting involved in a local chapter that we already have. So, of course, as mentioned many times, we have a lot of stuff going on within Wilmington, Newark area. I think within Delaware, we also have a chapter in Georgetown, Delaware. And if you happen to be, or you're going to, you know, maybe another location on our chapter map, we do have that on our website as well. So you can check out, you know, any place kind of both within the US or globally, if you want to get involved with one of those chapters and just like reach out directly. Okay, so with that all said, I saved around 10 minutes just to do a bit of a Q&A. I'll save kind of the slide so you guys can have the links to everything. But yeah, I'm really happy and excited and love to hear like all of your questions, and loved hearing all of you guys share kind of throughout the workshop as well. So if there's any questions I can answer about like myself, about Tugi, about gardening, about any of the topics discussed, I'd love to.
Yeah, thank you, Megan, for your awesome presentation and the really cool information and informative stuff that you presented. So just like Megan said, if you guys have questions about urban gardening or anything related to that, feel free to put that in the comment section and we'll get that answered ASAP. I know Miss Tracy had put a question in earlier, and she had asked, what's the most common mistake made by new gardeners?
Could you repeat that? Sorry, you said biggest mistake made.
What is the most common mistake made by new gardeners?
Yeah, so I think I see like a couple different things. I think one of them is like definitely choosing a plant that's not the easiest. I think especially if you like search online, like what plants can you like grow, a ton of them come up. And sometimes like when you're first starting, the plants that come up are not the easiest to kind of get started on. So I would definitely suggest, whether it's like the green onion or like any of the other ones that shown on the screen. Of course, there's dozens of others that you can grow as well. But making sure that you start off with something that's really easy. I also see, especially when it comes to container gardening, a lot of people like not choosing the right size container for what they're growing, overwatering versus underwatering, especially if you're just starting out, just entirely forgetting to water altogether, which I've definitely done many times. And a plant is super fragile, so if you shock it a couple of times because of the weather, because of how much you're watering it, it can totally just die really fast, and it's really hard to kind of revive it. So those are a couple of things I've seen for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I think simplicity plus experience is a huge factor. I think Marilyn also asked, what got you so interested in the topic of food deserts and urban gardening? And then it's so cool seeing other teenagers that are interested in the environment, and so it's cool hearing what got people so interested and involved. So can you talk about your environmental story?
Yeah, so it's kind of a long one, so I won't bore you with all the details, but I would say at least in terms of general environment and how I got started, I've always been really passionate about the environment ever since I was really young, just like really curious about like earth and the natural world and flowers and clouds and like all these different things. And especially as I entered high school, it definitely did not jump at all from me, being like not really interested to like starting a nonprofit, is really like a lot of building blocks and a lot of different projects I started before Tugi, that kind of all led up to me starting or finding like this issue of like food deserts and urban gardening and kind of ultimately starting Tugi. So I would say one of the experiences I want to mention is through like something called Diamond Challenge, which some of you guys, if you're more into like entrepreneurship business, might have heard about as well. I was pretty much, I want to say like my freshman or sophomore year. Oh, cool. Okay, you're doing that as well. So yeah, I applied under like the social impact version of that, and worked on creating this company that was all about like creating biodegradable utensils made out of like food waste. So through that business and through kind of that venture, I learned a ton about food deserts and food justice and food waste on more of a global scale, and all of that kind of thing. And then, as mentioned as well, I had the opportunity to work at an urban garden within Delaware, or Wilmington specifically, like right in the middle of the city. And I probably worked there for around over 6 months. And every single week when I would work there, I would go to like the local farmers market because I would like work there as well. And just like learn a ton from like local Wilmington residents about what's going on in the city, how they love the farmers market that was here, but how much of kind of Wilmington being a food desert was an issue. And I also learned how there was like not nearly enough being done about what's going on in Wilmington. So just a ton kind of going on around that sense. And something I think kind of is like related to this question as well, and I feel like sometimes I get this like from some like other people as well, is like, oh, how did you like start a nonprofit, or like what was that leap from like that to like starting it? And I think the most important thing, from like what I've learned through this whole process so far, is it's like starting a nonprofit is not nearly the only solution to like tackling a lot of these issues. And I think when I went into doing this kind of work, like starting a nonprofit was like kind of the farthest thing from my mind, at least initially. It was more so I started Tubi as like just a program within Wilmington, just working with a couple schools, and it eventually kind of grew into this nonprofit and the work that we're doing now. But I always say that as like, I feel like a lot of times nowadays we just like see youth starting nonprofits. We feel like that's the only way you can go about making change on some of these issues, but there's really a lot of other things that you can do as well. So very long-winded, but that was to answer a couple pieces of your question. That's what I would say.
Yeah, thank you for your advice with that. Does anyone have any other questions? Well, while people are typing, whether they are or not, personally, I have a question of, when you started Tugi, or even before then, how did you reach out to people, especially with adults, and how did you deal with like a high schooler or a middle schooler during that time as you deal with adult income.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that like kind of connects with like the previous question from Marilyn as well. I think everything that you do, whether it's like high school, whether it's before, it's after, like everything kind of like builds on top of each other. So it's really hard to go from like ground zero to, doing all these like cold emailing and reaching out and networking and like starting a nonprofit. So I think like really like dipping your toes in the water and like maybe first getting involved with like other nonprofits, like building up almost a network in a way, and like connecting with some of those people that are like within your realm of what you're passionate about makes it a lot easier. So then when you get to the point of you actually having to like reach out to schools, having to reach out to people to serve on your board or like people to just get involved with like the work that you're doing, you already have a lot of those people within that, and you can kind of like make connections. So you're not starting from ground zero. With that being said as well, though, there's definitely a lot of cold emailing involved in kind of any of these spaces that you're going into. And at a certain point, it's like you just like build up your tolerance to it. It is very always kind of a little daunting when you first start, and you never know if someone's going to respond. But sometimes you get the coolest partnerships and you reach out to the coolest people and they respond, and it's just such a cool thing. So I would say just like don't be afraid to do it. Really put yourself out there, and the worst that someone can say is no. So, don't limit yourself. If you're trying to do something just like one person, like reach out to a bunch of people that maybe are within that realm and kind of can get you involved some way into doing what you want to do.
Yeah, definitely. So I don't think we have any other questions coming in, and I know we're coming close to our 7:15 mark, so I'm going to kind of close it up. But like Megan has on her slide, there's all of her contact information for those Susie, and if you want to reach out to her. So I think that's a great opportunity if you guys are interested. So as a closure, I just kind of want to remind everyone that this is one of our last workshops for the day, but we'll be having many more workshops tomorrow starting at 3 p.m. I also want to thank Megan again for coming and giving us a wonderful presentation regarding her work in urban gardening. And then a quick reminder for attendees that we're having our virtual scavenger hunt, and that all information can be found in the link that I just posted. So there will be 10 winners, and you have a chance to win some gift cards. So I highly recommend you going and filling that out. And then lastly, thank you to our sponsors for supporting YES. So that concludes our workshop for today, and our YES team hopes to see you in many of our upcoming sessions. So thank you for coming.